Welcome back to the channel, guys. Today we're going to be doing another weapon breakdown for Battlefield 2042, and this time we're going to be covering the SFAR-M GL, which is an absolute mouthful of a name, so I'm just going to refer to it as the SCAR, since I think that's just what we all know it as anyway. In these weapon breakdowns, we're going to go through a bunch of stats that you guys need to know, such as the rounds per minute, reload times, bullet velocity, damage over distance, bullets to kill over distance, and time to kill over distance as well. On top of those stats, we'll then go over the recoil pattern for the weapon, and then lastly I'll go over 3 unique loadouts that I've crafted for specific playstyles for those of you who aren't 100% sure on which attachments to use. Before we get into it, if you guys do end up enjoying the video, then be sure to leave a like down below, and if you guys are new to the channel, then definitely hit that subscribe button and turn on those notifications, as there's going to be plenty more content like this on the way in 2022. With that being said though, guys, let's get stuck right into my weapon breakdown for the SCAR. So the SCAR is obviously classed as an assault rifle, and you unlock this bad boy at level 27. Now it has a magazine size of 20 plus 1 in the chamber, which is obviously not very much at all, and it fires at a rate of 599 rounds per minute, which is actually the slowest out of the ARs in 2042 and is pretty much the slowest automatic weapon in the game. Now for its reload times, it takes 2.5 seconds for a tactical reload, which is when you manually reload it, or it has an empty reload time of 3.7 seconds, which is when it is automatically reloaded after running out of bullets. So obviously it is best to try and reload it manually to save quite a bit of time per reload. As for the velocity, it sends its ammunition down range at 660 meters per second, which is actually the fastest out of the ARs currently in the game, but it is only by a little bit in most cases, so it's almost on par with those other weapons. Now getting into the more detailed stats for the SCAR, keep in mind that these values are all based off of body shots, and when it comes to the ARs, headshots have a 2 times multiplier, so any value that you see in these graphs are just doubled when you land them to the head rather than the torso or the limbs. The SCAR deals 22 damage per bullet up to 29 meters, then between 30 and 49 meters it actually increases to 26 damage per shot, and then at 50 meters and beyond it drops down to 22 damage per shot again. So essentially it has no drop off at all, and this is actually the only weapon that has a damage spike past a certain range, which I found to be pretty interesting. As for the bullets that it takes to kill over distance, and again keep in mind these are just body shot stats here, it takes 5 shots to kill up to 29 meters, then between 30 and 49 meters it takes 4 shots to kill, and then at 50 meters and beyond it'll take 5 shots to the body to kill an enemy. Lastly, moving on to the time to kill over distance, it kills in 400 milliseconds up to 29 meters, then 300 milliseconds between 30 and 49 meters, and from 50 meters and beyond it will again take 400 milliseconds to kill. Obviously these stats do vary quite a bit once you account for headshots and miss shots like I mentioned, but assuming you hit every shot to the body at these ranges, then these stats are accurate according to that situation. Now moving on, we have the recoil pattern for the SCAR, and as you can see it is actually pretty random for the most part. It has plenty of vertical recoil, but then there's also quite a bit of horizontal recoil there too, which really just does whatever it wants sometimes, while other times it's pretty straight, so it can be a hard one to read, and this is the type of weapon that you should definitely be tapping the trigger with rather than spraying whenever possible. This is just the factory SCAR that I'm showing here. I do have some videos on the channel covering some different attachment types and how they affect recoil and the overall weapon behavior, so be sure to check those ones out as well. Now moving on, like I mentioned, I've actually crafted 3 different loadouts that I like to often use on the SCAR, depending on the mode or the map or just how I feel like playing in general. So if you're not 100% sure on what attachments to use, then hopefully this can give you a good starting point, and keep in mind that you can obviously bring 3 attachments per slot in the plus system, so technically you can bring all 3 of these loadouts along and change them on the fly. Also keep in mind that the SCAR actually doesn't have a whole lot of attachment options, and there are also some that are a lot better than the rest, so all 3 of these builds are actually pretty similar in a lot of ways, but they are still unique enough for different situations. The first loadout that I wanted to cover is the close range build, and this one is pretty much as good as you'll get this weapon to be at close range, but just keep in mind it's really not as good up close as most other ARs or SMGs, so this is really only for when you're forced into that situation. For the sight I use the Fusion Hollow simply because it is the one that I like the best and it gives a nice clear sight. For the ammo I use the high power drum. The SCAR obviously has very little ammo and it's really its main weakness, so countering that with the drum mag is a no-brainer. For the underbarrel I use the incendiary grenade, as this is actually pretty decent in those more sort of close quarters areas, and obviously the SCAR has no other underbarrel attachments such as grips, so a grenade type is a requirement. And then lastly for the barrel I use the tactical compensator, which just increases the accuracy of the weapon in regards to the spread. while actually adding a little bit of extra recoil, but at close range that recoil shouldn't be an issue. Now moving on to the second loadout I wanted to cover, this one is the long range build, and this is pretty much where the SCAR is at its most dominant against other automatic weapons, as it's easily one of the strongest long range weapons in the game. For the sight I use the TV 2x scope purely because I think it gives a good amount of zoom and it is also nice and clear. For the ammo I use the high powered drum again. For the underbarrel I use the 40mm smoke grenade, as it helps a lot with moving from cover to cover if you are in some more sort of wide open areas, although the smoke grenade from the launcher is definitely not nearly as good as the regular smoke grenade. And then lastly for the barrel I use the Warhawk compensator. This one actually reduces your recoil a little bit, which helps stay on target at range, but it will also make it slightly less accurate in terms of the spread. Now lastly for the third loadout, this one is the meta build, and this is essentially just a loadout that I use about 80% of the time when I'm running the SCAR, as in my opinion this is pretty much the all-round best loadout for the weapon. For the sight I use the UH1 Smart 1.5x scope, as I think this gives a perfect balance between the Fusion Holo and the TV 2x in terms of the zoom. For the ammo I use the high powered drum once again. For the underbarrel I use the 40mm smoke again, as it just feels like this has the best use out of all the other grenade options. And then lastly for the barrel I use the tactical compensator again for that added accuracy. Like I said, this is my personal favourite build for the SCAR, and this is the one that I'm running around with pretty much all the time when I'm using the SCAR, so hopefully you guys enjoy this one as much as I do. So that is pretty much it for the SCAR, guys. Personally I really enjoy using this one, and I do actually think that it is pretty underused considering it's so solid at that sort of mid to long range, although obviously its lack of ammo and just not being the best up close do take away from it compared to some of the others, but overall it is still a really solid weapon. Up next I'm hoping to cover the PP29 for the SMG class, but other than that let me know which weapons you want me to cover next, as I'm largely going to base them off what you guys want to see the most, so be sure to leave some recommendations down in the comments section. If you enjoyed the video then be sure to leave a like down below, and if you are new then consider subscribing to the channel with those notifications on. If you guys want to support the content that I make here on YouTube then consider becoming a channel member. But with that being said, thank you all very much for watching. You guys have a great day and I'll see you all out there on the battlefield.